Sarah never imagined that her husband's newfound friendship would reveal itself to be a carefully orchestrated deception that would ultimately destroy their marriage and threaten another family. At 32, she found herself trapped in a devastating situation where uncovering the truth meant potentially harming innocent children, while staying silent meant accepting betrayal and financial manipulation that could leave her with nothing. The story of Sarah's marriage crisis began 2 years ago when she first started noticing subtle changes in her 36-year-old husband Michael's behavior. These weren't dramatic shifts that immediately screamed infidelity, but rather small inconsistencies and patterns that gradually accumulated into a growing sense of unease and suspicion. Michael had reconnected with an old colleague from the construction industry, a friend he'd originally met over a decade ago when he managed his first major construction project. While they had maintained casual contact over the years, their relationship had suddenly intensified over the past 2 to 3 years, coinciding exactly with when Sarah suspected her husband's affair had begun. What made the situation particularly complex and painful was that the affair wasn't with a random stranger or casual acquaintance, but with the wife of Michael's friend and business colleague. This meant that what appeared to be innocent social gatherings and professional networking was actually providing cover for an ongoing betrayal that involved 2 marriages and multiple families. The pattern of deception began innocently enough, with Michael spending increasing amounts of time with this friend and his wife. What started as occasional professional meetings evolved into regular social gatherings where the three of them would spend time together, creating a social dynamic that provided perfect camouflage for the developing affair. Sarah began noticing that encounters with her husband's friend's wife were happening with suspicious frequency. They would run into her constantly on the street, and she seemed to appear magically and randomly whenever Sarah and Michael went out. These weren't coincidental meetings in a small town, they were happening too often to be explained by chance alone. Have you ever noticed a pattern of coincidental encounters that made you suspicious? How do you distinguish between paranoia and genuine red flags in a relationship? The red flags became more obvious when Sarah discovered the woman at Michael's office. When questioned, the woman claimed she was there to leave something from her husband, but the explanation felt hollow and rehearsed. The timing and circumstances suggested that these office visits were routine rather than exceptional. Even more telling was an incident when Michael kicked Sarah out of his office, claiming he was extremely busy with important clients and couldn't be disturbed. But Sarah suspected that instead of meeting with clients, he was actually meeting with his affair partner in private, using his workplace as a secret venue for their relationship. The evidence that finally confirmed Sarah's suspicions came in the form of a receipt for an expensive piece of jewelry, a $2,000 necklace that Michael couldn't adequately explain. When confronted about this significant purchase, Michael offered contradictory and implausible explanations that revealed his desperation to cover up the truth. Michael's first explanation was that the receipt must have been accidentally dropped by his mother, which made no sense given that his mother would have no reason to be making expensive jewelry purchases and leaving the receipts in their home. When this explanation failed to satisfy Sarah's questions, he tried an even more ridiculous story. His alternative explanation was that they must have somehow brought the receipt into their home on their shoes, suggesting it had been on the street and was dirty and ripped when Sarah found it. This explanation was not only implausible but insulting to Sarah's intelligence, revealing Michael's panic and his assumption that she would accept any story rather than confront the truth. Sarah's detective work revealed the devastating reality behind the jewelry receipt. She looked up the specific piece at the jeweler's Instagram account and discovered that it was identical to a necklace that Michael's friend's wife had posted herself wearing. This was concrete evidence that Michael had spent $2,000 on jewelry for his affair partner, money from their shared resources used to buy gifts for another woman. When Sarah presented this evidence to Michael, his response revealed the classic tactics of someone caught in infidelity: denial, gaslighting, and attacking the victim's mental state. Instead of acknowledging the obvious truth or showing remorse for his actions, Michael accused Sarah of being crazy and trying to chase away an innocent woman. How do you handle it when someone you love gaslights you about obvious evidence of betrayal? What strategies help you trust your own perceptions when they're being challenged? Michael's defense strategy was to reframe his affair partner as an amazing friend to us, suggesting that Sarah's suspicions were not only wrong but harmful to a valuable friendship. This tactic attempted to make Sarah feel guilty for questioning obvious evidence and to position himself as the reasonable person trying to preserve important relationships. But Sarah knew she wasn't crazy, and the evidence was too overwhelming to ignore. The combination of the constant coincidental encounters, the office visits, the expensive jewelry, and Michael's implausible explanations created a clear picture of ongoing infidelity that no amount of gaslighting could erase. The complexity of Sarah's situation went beyond simple infidelity discovery. She was facing a dilemma that many betrayed spouses don't encounter: how to proceed when revealing the truth would potentially harm innocent people, specifically children, who had no role in creating this crisis but would inevitably be affected by its resolution. This moral complexity was further complicated by Michael's apparent campaign to damage Sarah's reputation among their mutual friends and acquaintances. He was making up things about Sarah to other people, presumably to discredit her in advance of any accusations she might make and to control the narrative around their marriage problems. The financial aspects of Sarah's dilemma added another layer of stress and urgency to her decision-making process. Despite having contributed significantly more to their marriage's financial foundation than Michael had, she was facing the prospect of losing everything if she proceeded with divorce under current circumstances. Sarah's financial contributions to their marriage were substantial and well documented. She had personally paid for 2 of their 3 cars, demonstrating her financial independence and contribution to their shared assets. More significantly, her parents had gifted them their house, representing a major financial contribution that had benefited Michael despite his having no claim to it based on his own resources. Additionally, Sarah's family had invested in Michael's business, providing him with capital and support that had presumably contributed to whatever success and financial stability he had achieved in his construction career. These investments represented not just money, but trust and faith in Michael as a person and as a member of their extended family. Should family financial contributions to a marriage be protected differently in divorce proceedings? How do you handle situations where one spouse's family has invested significantly in the other spouse's success? Despite these substantial contributions from Sarah and her family, Michael was demanding more than a 50-50 split of their assets in any potential divorce. His position was not just greedy, but deeply unfair, given that Sarah's contributions had far exceeded his own throughout their marriage. Michael's demand for more than half of their assets while simultaneously conducting an affair represented a level of entitlement and disrespect that went beyond the original betrayal. He was essentially trying to profit from his infidelity by taking assets that he hadn't earned and that existed largely because of Sarah's and her family's generosity. The fact that Sarah wasn't a housewife added another dimension to the unfairness of Michael's demands. She had maintained her own career and financial independence throughout their marriage, contributing both her own earnings and her family's resources to their shared life. She hadn't sacrificed her career or earning potential for the marriage in ways that might justify an unequal asset division. Sarah found herself contemplating whether she should do the same to him, presumably meaning whether she should play hardball in divorce proceedings and attempt to leave Michael with as little as possible. This internal struggle reflected her fundamentally decent character, conflicting with her justifiable anger and desire for fair treatment. The strategic considerations Sarah faced were complex and multifaceted. She needed to protect her own financial interests while potentially exposing an affair that would harm children, all while dealing with a husband who was actively trying to damage her reputation and steal her assets. Professional divorce attorneys often advise that the betrayed spouse should secure evidence and protect their financial interests before confronting the cheating partner or making any moves towards separation. Sarah's situation required particularly careful planning given the complex web of relationships and the substantial assets at stake. The question of whether to expose the affair publicly or handle it privately was complicated by Michael's preemptive strikes against Sarah's character. If he was already spreading lies about her, remaining silent might not protect her reputation anyway, while speaking up might at least ensure that people heard her side of the story. How do you balance your own need for justice with protecting innocent people who might be harmed by revealing the truth? Is it fair to expect the betrayed spouse to protect the affair partner's family? The involvement of children in the other marriage created ethical considerations that many betrayed spouses don't face. Sarah had to weigh her own need for justice and vindication against the potential harm to innocent children who would suffer from their parents' divorce and the public exposure of their family's crisis. From a practical standpoint, Sarah's evidence was strong enough to support her claims, but might not be sufficient for legal proceedings depending on her jurisdiction's divorce laws. The jewelry receipt and Instagram evidence provided compelling proof of the affair, but building a comprehensive case might require additional documentation and investigation. The timing of any action Sarah took would be crucial for both legal and personal reasons. Moving too quickly might not allow her to gather sufficient evidence or secure her financial interests, while waiting too long might give Michael more time to hide assets or further damage her reputation. Sarah's family's investments in Michael's business created additional complications that would need to be addressed in any divorce proceedings. Depending on how these investments were structured, Sarah's family might have legal claims against Michael or his business that could be pursued independently of the divorce. The construction industry connections between Michael and his affair partner's husband added another layer of complexity to the situation. Exposing the affair could potentially impact professional relationships and business dealings in ways that might affect multiple people's livelihoods and careers. Sarah's story highlighted how modern affairs often involve social media evidence that previous generations of betrayed spouses didn't have access to. The Instagram post showing the jewelry provided concrete proof that would have been impossible to obtain in pre-digital eras, demonstrating both the challenges and advantages of investigating infidelity in the social media age. The psychological impact of discovering such a comprehensive and long-term betrayal, combined with financial manipulation and character assassination, created a perfect storm of trauma that Sarah would need to address regardless of her legal strategy. The gaslighting alone represented a form of psychological abuse that would require healing. Support systems would be crucial for Sarah's recovery and decision-making process. Having family members who had invested in the marriage and business meant she likely had people who were personally invested in seeing justice done, which could provide both emotional and potentially financial support. The question of how to get out of this without hurting people that don't deserve it reflected Sarah's fundamentally compassionate nature, but also revealed a common trap that betrayed spouses fall into: taking responsibility for consequences that were created by their partner's choices, not their own actions. Professional counselors often remind betrayed spouses that exposing infidelity doesn't create the harm. The affair itself creates the harm. The betrayed spouse is simply revealing damage that already exists, and protecting the affair partner's family by staying silent often enables continued harm rather than preventing it. Sarah's situation served as a reminder that infidelity cases involving couples who are friends or colleagues create particularly complex webs of deception and consequences. The social connections that should provide support and stability instead become vehicles for betrayal and manipulation. The financial manipulation aspect of Sarah's story, where the cheating spouse attempts to profit from their betrayal, represents a particularly cruel form of victimization that adds injury to insult. Michael wasn't content with betraying Sarah emotionally. He also wanted to steal her financial security and her family's contributions. Ultimately, Sarah's dilemma came down to choosing between protecting others at her own expense or protecting herself and accepting that others might be harmed by the consequences of choices she didn't make. The resolution would require her to recognize that her primary responsibility was to herself and that she couldn't control or prevent all the consequences of Michael's betrayal. The path forward for Sarah would likely require comprehensive legal advice, documented evidence gathering, and a support system that could help her navigate both the practical and emotional challenges of leaving a marriage where she had been both betrayed and financially manipulated. Her story demonstrated that sometimes the most compassionate thing someone can do is refuse to enable continued deception, even when the truth is painful for everyone involved. Sarah's journey from suspicion to devastating discovery illustrates the complex moral and practical challenges that arise when infidelity intersects with friendship networks and family finances. Her ultimate decision would need to balance self-preservation with compassion, recognizing that while she couldn't control all the consequences of revealing the truth, she also couldn't sacrifice her own well-being to protect others from the fallout of choices she didn't make.